Thank you all for joining our first chair chat of 2021. 2022. I don't know what year I'm in anymore. 2022. I can't believe it. I'm Ken Mejia-Beal, chair of the Democratic Party of DuPage County, and today I am honored to have my friend and my state representative, State Rep Terra Costa Howard, on with us today. I met Representative Costa Howard in 2018. I cannot remember how, when, or where, but what I do remember, and this is something I don't know who said it, you don't always remember the who, the what, the when, the where, but you remember the feel. And I just remember walking away feeling like, okay, this is a real person that can do real change in Springfield. And when I decided to run, was one of the first people I reached out to because I knew I would get an honest answer. So thank you, Representative Costa Howard, for joining us.
Thanks, Ken. Thank you for your kind words. I think you're right. It's the where. We always remember the generalities, but the feel is definitely it. And I know we've been friends ever since then, and every time we get to see each other, it's always a nice to have a friend nearby. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. How are you doing, by the way? I know you're just returning back from Springfield, and how's that?
You know what, it's going to Springfield even for a day is always sort of a crazy thing. You never quite know what's going to happen. You think you know, but let me tell you, Springfield, the way it starts is rarely how it finishes at the end of the day. So it kind of takes you some time to get your feet back on the ground, wake up, get some good solid sleep, and then regroup and go forward. So coming home to this cold was, it's cold. I know,
yes, it is.
It's cold today.
It's freezing. It is freezing. Well, I'm going to jump into our first question, and this is one that I'm genuinely curious about. What has been your proudest accomplishment serving as a state representative? What moment are you the most proud of?
What I would say the moment that I remember that just so vivid to me was the evening that we passed the Reproductive Health Act. It was a bill in 2019 that was passed, and I remember crying. I'm the mother of 3 daughters, and I know for my entire career as an attorney, somebody who's advocated for women and children and families, the idea that we can protect women and to give them the autonomy to make decisions about themselves and their lives, and to provide options for them. It was that moment for me, knowing that I was in a moment of history, that we changed the world. We changed the world that day. And there's a silly picture of me that's out there of raising my hands, knowing, because it's not about a victory. It's about knowing that we passed something that changed people's lives. And we could have never guessed what today would be with the climate of the Supreme Court, but knowing on that day we changed history. And I still, my proudest moment.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that because last night I did a kind of a roundtable with the Downers Grove Progressive Women, and they asked what was one of the things that we as the state of Illinois should always remember, and I answered that especially when it comes to women's reproductive rights, we really are a beacon and a sea of red. We are one of the last places that you can go here in the Midwest where women can get medical treatment for, just women's repro rights, and it's important. So thank you.
You're welcome. And I mean, I think my colleagues in it, and believe me, there were many moments that we didn't think it was going to happen. But as soon, I guess in some ways we can thank all of those states around us who started to file and then pass some of the most egregious affront to women's rights. And that's really what did it. We didn't, that's really what pushed everybody over the edge. And thank God that we did. Again, listening to the arguments. Many of us have listened to the Supreme Court arguments, and unfortunately, we all have a pit in our stomachs as to what's most likely going to happen. And it's incredibly disheartening that we are going to move backwards in our nation regarding women and women's health. So the fact that we got it done, we did it right, and that we're a model for other states in our nation, I'm proud of that. I stand by it every day.
As you should be. And as we talk about obstacles, my next question for you is, as we are still, I feel like we've been in pandemic times for a very long time at this point, and our numbers are spiking yet again. What has been your personal biggest obstacle of being a legislator during a time of pandemic?
It's interesting you say that, because in terms of, just thinking about obstacles during the pandemic, because my initial answer is communication. So what we have found is, in the beginning of the pandemic, when, everything was hitting the fan, we as legislators were not getting information from the governor's office the way we believe we should have. And that made it really hard for us to do our job. Now, anybody who knows me, I'm very supportive of our governor, of their staff, but as a legislator, our job is to help people, and we have constituent services, and, we didn't have information. So like everyone else, we were glued to our TVs every day watching those press conferences. Has it improved? Absolutely. But what's interesting is some of my colleagues on Wednesday, when we were in Springfield, were sort of talking about those of us who are new. Of the 3 years that we have been here, 2 of those 3 years have been in a pandemic. So we did some incredible legislation in 2019. We had begun that track, in 2020, and then the pandemic hit, and everything switched gears. And it's important, to note that we are always trying to get information out to our constituents. We're trying to get information from different agencies in the governor's office, but it's really hard during this pandemic because it's always moving. Things are always changing, and so it's hard for us to actually always have in the moment information, and we're learning on the fly as well.
Thank you for that. Next, because that's a lot of juggling you just discussed, and keeping up with temperament, and you also have to balance other people throwing things at you during a rough time in their life. I know I'm married to someone who went through, as I like to call, the unemployment line hell during the pandemic. That was really rough. I know you guys were getting lots of calls from constituents about delays and a lot. So I'm sure that was just a very difficult time.
Well, it was, and we're still, we always talk about, like, particularly, you mentioned unemployment. We're always trying to get back and try to how do we go back and double check on all those people who had issue, and we do that follow up. But it was hard, and I think one of the things that we worked really hard to get people to understand is it wasn't just Illinois that had the fraud cases or the problems with the online system. Every state in the nation was experiencing these same problems. I have family that live in Rhode Island, and she's the finance and HR. And when I called her to ask her if they were having these problems, she said absolutely. And we would get letters about fraud, and we didn't know what was happening. So it wasn't just a state of Illinois issue. It was an issue that was every state was faced with.
Wow. I did not even think about the other 49 states.
Yeah, and like I said, and none of us did, right? I mean, when we, I hate to say we were being very parochial, because in that moment, all we care about is Illinois, and that, or I shouldn't say that. We care about every state, but our focus was Illinois, and our focus was our district, and how do we help the people? How do you deal with that constituent who calls you in this? I mean, we people were crying on the phone to us, to our staff. And that takes a really big toll on all of us, not just those of us who are, experiencing that, but our staff. and it was rough. I mean, it's still rough, but we're learning how to manage ourselves through it.
Well, I think you're personally doing a great job. So my next question kind of piggybacks on that. What in your life, whether it be work experience, education, whatever you want to say, has best prepared you to be able to do the phenomenal job that you're doing as a state legislator?
You know, it's hard to pick any one thing in my life. I wish I could say, I wish you could pinpoint it, but I think that I've been very fortunate in my life to have a lot of different experiences. I'm a lawyer, so I deal with negotiation. I deal with, in the particular area of law that I practice, I deal with families. I was a public defender, people who are indigent and understanding their needs. But I also was a school board member, and I had to deal with challenging board members. And again, being on, I negotiated union contracts with people. I had to learn what is my role, particularly in the school board, what is your role? Our role as school board member isn't to get into the curriculum, it's to be at a high level. And so understanding that your job isn't to be in day-to-day operations. I guess sometimes though, I was instructor at College DuPage. So again, I will, as a teacher, as an instructor, you're dealing with students, you have grades, you have, your lesson plans, organization of all of those things. But I think sometimes too, just being a mom, being a parent, having that life experience. I'm a daughter, I'm an aunt, I'm a sister, I'm a cousin, I'm a friend. And I think just that human experience and that willingness to interact with people on many different levels is something that's always helped me. Because I don't know if there's any one thing that can really prepare you for this job. I have, because when you get there, the table gets flipped and you got to figure it out really, really quickly.
Yeah, I can only imagine. As we talk about tables being flipped and things that excite people, both positive and negative, you're gearing up to run again. And this time I will be able to vote for you, so super excited about that. I'm ready to knock the door.
Me too. Yard
yes.
sign, yes.
Let's do it. What, and I know this is going to be a hard one. So what one piece of legislation or one piece of information will you be champion, if you could just pick one thing to run throughout the district to get people to get to the polls, or more importantly, get people to understand what's really important here in 2022? What would that piece of legislation, or what would that look like to you?
I have a couple of things that are important to me that I know that I'm going to be working on. But when you voting rights, elections, election integrity. Yesterday, I'll be honest, I don't think I would have 24 hours ago, I hadn't thought about it in that way. But after participating in a vigil yesterday and going back and thinking about myself and where was I on January 6th, the need to make sure that we have a fair and safe election system in place. I've had the opportunity and honor to work with the Illinois House Democratic Women's Caucus in the elections working group. And we started that in 2020. Again, to start talking about ways and things that we are going to change. And so I'm going to be working on a piece of legislation this year with a couple of organizations on the ballot. So I'm sure many of you remember that we've had a ballot challenge here in DuPage County that our Democrats successfully succeeded, and Bill White will stay as he should. And it was just as simple, the ballot initials were something that cost our county thousands of dollars, and really shed light on some of the imperfections, some of the things that are archaic to a certain extent within our election system. So I'm going to be working on that piece of legislation with my colleagues. There's a group out there called Common Cause that Tyler St. Clair is one of the individuals involved. A really amazing organization on voting rights. And so I really believe that that's something that we need to continue to talk about. I know, I hope, Ken, you as a party chair, I know that that's something that's important to you and to our party as a whole out here in DuPage County. And so I'm hoping that we're going to see, you know, a lot more voter registration and conversation about voting rights and what that looks like, because it matters, and we know it matters.
It's a huge thing, and I will segue a little bit because it's something you just said kind of sparked something in me. When I knock on doors, I'm talking to folks, I get a little bit more upset at the people who say I don't vote than the people who say I'm not voting for you. And it's because the right to vote is so important. And I'm fortunate enough, my grandfather was someone who was arrested several times for attempting to register to vote. So it was drilled in me that this is not something that should be taken for granted. So whatever we have to do as a party, we have to get people to realize this is not a, this is a, I don't even have words. It's not a right. It is a privilege to be able to go and elect the people that can use your voice. Every country doesn't have this, and in other states it's really, really hard. You know, voter rolls, knocking the polling places out of the way, and in Illinois we're kind of fortunate. So we have to get our people to realize we have a gift here and we got to use it.
I mean, elections are not a spectator sport. You know, democracy is not a spectator sport. We have to be engaged. And it's funny that you say that about knocking the door and somebody says, I don't vote, my vote doesn't matter. It kind of breaks your heart to think that their vote doesn't matter, because we all know, especially in the last 4 years, how many elections that we've been involved in where every vote counted, where we were running to people's homes and making sure affidavits were signed and making sure that people who voted, that their vote mattered, that it was counted. And it's disappointing when people just assume that it doesn't matter and that their voice doesn't need to be heard. And that's just simply not true. And so we, once again, as a party, I know I trust you and your team, but I know as a candidate, I knock doors all year long. We knock doors all the time. We talk to people. We knocked doors during the last election where some campaigns were very concerned about safety, and we were too. Believe me, we took every safety precaution there was out there, and we were good about it. And my team it was great. We did what we needed to do. We wore masks at the doors. We had gloves on when needed. And it mattered to people that we showed up, and it mattered to them that we asked, and they went and voted. And our vote, I mean, the data shows how many people went out and voted, and we've got to continue to protect that right.
I 100% agree. Another thing that I was doing some research on you, and I found that we have a little something in common. I started out before being political in my work with food deserts. And I know that you are a huge advocate for food banks throughout, probably before you became a legislator, but what I looked at is since you've been a legislator, the work you've done with our local food banks, what draws you to be an advocate for the food banks?
So, you know, food is one of those things that brings people together, right? You know, people cook a Sunday meal, family comes in, food is a language of love. And food nourishes not just your body, it nourishes your soul. And so when we know that there are people who don't have access to food, it's more than just the physical nourishment of it. And so we've had the opportunity to partner with we do a lot with our blood drives, we sort of partner these things up, but we do porch pickups, we do it all because it's important. There's just no other way to talk about it. We also found, like, obviously during the pandemic, we watched our food banks have a huge increase in the number of clients that they have. And so to meet that need, you needed more volunteers, you needed more donations. And I got to tell you, people have stepped up. So I have to thank everyone out there for stepping up and just that much more that they've become involved. But what we also found was that fear and that look in people's eyes where they might have enough food for today, but they don't know if they're going to have dinner or breakfast for tomorrow. And so that's a real fear. And when, again, the pandemic, the unemployment numbers, we spent a lot of time, and we spent a lot of time even, working with our school districts, right? Making sure that we were working with them. Every Friday, we were out there with District 45, distributing meals, breakfast and lunches. And it was a very eye-opening experience, not just for my staff, but for me as well, that this is a real issue. And most people don't think that we have that kind of issue here in DuPage County, but it's a real issue.
And that was my next kind of question for you, because here in DuPage, there is a myth that we all have more than we need. So if you could really quickly, how do we overcome that myth, number one, and what can we do to help with our food banks locally?
Well, first of all, to overcome the myth, we have to educate people that poverty, food insecurity, homelessness, it looks different in the suburbs than it does in other parts of the state. And so it's incumbent upon us to remind people that these things do exist. We do workshops, our emails every week, put that information out there. Again, those partnerships with different organizations to get the information out there. How can we all help? Just keep donating. I know sometimes our food pantries prefer a dollar donation, and heck, I can tell you $10. Our food pantries can buy a lot of food and feed a lot of people with $10. And they can do that because they have some different partnerships. But even the way our food, volunteering your time. I know in 2020 we did a large group of York Township Democrats. We did a event where we went and helped the Lombardville Park Food Pantry, and we helped sort food, an extra pair of hands. Those are the kinds of things that make a difference. It could be an hour, it can be 15 minutes. Every little bit helps. And so we as a party, I think that's part of what we should do. Maybe as we're getting signatures, or as we're, when we started really canvassing in other ways, we can take that opportunity to do porch pickups. And people love porch pickups, right? They don't have to think about it. They just leave it in a bag and off they go.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, Representative Costa Howard, because something that we are working on at the Democratic Party of DuPage County, working with Vice Chair Barnes and Executive Director of Summer Camp and Chair Tyree, we are planning on doing petition/food drives. So we are going to be collecting food, getting signatures, and making an impact. And a little bit of that comes from a lot that you just said that we've noticed here in DuPage, and we want to help out as much as we can. So we're going to be collecting food. We're going to be collecting hygiene products, feminine hygiene products. We're going to be collecting it all, and signatures. So that is something that we are working on. It's one of those things as chair I think we should be doing. So looking forward to that.
Well, remember, Ken, we're the party of the people, right? We're the
Yes.
party that actually goes out and does the work. We actually help people. We are the boots in the ground to do the things that people need us to do. And it's more than just passing the budget. It's more than making sure agencies have the skill, what they need. It's about actually putting work and people behind the policies that we as Democrats believe in. It's something I'm very proud of. I'm proud to be a Democrat because we actually do the work. We actually care about people.
I love that. And Representative Costa Howard, one more question for you, and this is a fun one, maybe. So, of all the foods in the world, speaking of food, what is something that you've never eaten, but you really, really want to, and as soon as you get the opportunity to, you're going to go for it?
Okay, so it's hard. So a fun fact about me, I do not eat anything that lives in water. That's sort of how I describe it. You and I have joked about it. I don't eat fish.
We've
I'll
talked.
cook it for everybody. but it's not something I eat. So thinking about what haven't I tried that I'd like to is tough. I guess I would say fresh Italian food from Italy. So I love to travel. And I would love the opportunity someday when I have the time and can afford to go. I would love a food tour in a place like Italy or Greece or something, and just taste fresh regatta, taste, fresh pasta, from a street corner, a slice of pizza. It just, we love farm to table. We talk about it all the time. I love going to food markets and eating the stuff that's just coming out of the ground. Pure honey. There's something about eating real food from a local place. I mean, I don't care what country it is, just to taste their local cuisine, the local that the locals are eating, and give it a try, because it's about food. It's about the soul. It's about feeding, one's beliefs. It's just such a good feeling to be able to do that. And it really, a dinner table and a meal really can, it builds bridges and it brings people together.
And I can't think of a better way to wrap up this chair chat than to now let's all rush out and get some fresh food, fresh pasta, fresh Parmesan cheese. I'm excited about it. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us this evening, Representative Costa Howard. And we look forward to seeing you on the campaign trail. And we look forward to helping you win an election and doing everything we can to make sure that the vision that you have in place is the vision that we can see in our future. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you for doing this. I think this is a great way to kick it off and to remind people that we as Democrats are here and we stand together.
Thank you. And have a wonderful evening, everyone. Good night.
Bye, everybody.